Truth, lies, shenanigans.
We're going to start out with Rob B today. You wanted to follow up your conversation about the recently found massacre of Indigenous children at Canadian schools. What's going on, Rob B?
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a discovery in Kamloops, BC, of 251 unmarked children's graves at a residential school. For those of you who don't know, residential schools were basically a system of schools that were government sanctioned, run by religious institutions to help. It was basically an assimilation program to take the indigenous population and give them more Eurocentric values and to essentially get rid of their traditional values.
I don't
And
know.
during the conversation,
I tend to imagine like those, I don't know, I don't know. Have you watched Annie? Like the
Yeah,
yeah,
orphanages and things like that, and just the
yeah.
cruelty there. And
Me too. I thought of that too.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just the image I get in my head. I'm sorry, Rob B, but go ahead.
yeah, no, and I mean that's right. But now imagine that you don't speak the language, that you don't know the culture, that you don't understand the values that these people have, their deities, their beliefs. It's so a real upheaval in these children's lives. And part of the conversation was that we need to update our historical memorials and monuments. And I came across a wonderful article that the National Cemetery in Canada is just doing that. It's the Ottawa's Beechwood National Cemetery, which is in Vanier, just outside of Ottawa. And they actually, since 2015, have been updating the plaques. And one of the more, that's it, just to give them a little bit more credence, a little bit more value. Um, there was one for Duncan Campbell Scott, who's a great Canadian poet, but he was also a key architect of the residential school system. So now he does have that footnote on his plaque, and it's happening. So the quote from the cemetery's director is that we believe in reconciliation and we believe in the dialogue that we can have. It's not about rewriting history. It's not about changing the history. It's about providing the element that has been missing. So Canada's taking some right steps in that respect. But no sooner did I find that and kind of started getting a little feel good about Canada, we got some more horrible news out of Saskatoon. The Cowess's First Nation announced that there was a preliminary finding of 751 additional unmarked graves, and this was at a cemetery near the former Merivale Indian Residential School.
So they were just
So that
killing
one,
children and throwing them into graves.
these were children that were reported as missing. This kid went into the woods, but yeah, 751 unmarked graves in another residential school cemetery. And this is it's flabbergasting because in two sites, we have a death toll of 1,000 children, and there were about 140 of these schools that ran throughout the entire program's existence. And now this has really sparked a lot of furor and some division with Canadians as the conversation is moving forward. And my question to the panel is, in light of this latest discovery of 751 additional bodies, should Canada Day 2021 be relegated to a day of observance rather than a day of celebration?
Hmm. So you're saying change Canada Day altogether to be sort of
I'm saying Canada Day
Just for this
2021. I'm
year.
not saying
just this year.
change it completely. Yeah. So this year, in light of all these recent findings, and there will be more. Yeah, I'm just this year, and as far as reading the room is concerned, should we be celebrating, or should we really be observing?
Let's go with Gianni on this one to start.
For sure, you guys should be observing, and maybe even every year, honestly. Because honestly, that's really sad, guys. That's really, really tragic. And I didn't know that. Um, well, you guys didn't know either that Canada had that history of Indigenous people and children being treated that way. I know that every continent, every country has some form of that, but when we learn of like innocence being taken and just like blood on their hands, now it's like, okay, let's start to do something about this. I think remembrance is just like a little sprinkle to especially for 2021, just this year. I don't think that's enough. But for sure, you guys should remember them for Canada Day. It should be a day of observance. And I think that I had a question actually. When you guys said that they were being killed, like children and indigenous people were being killed, how were they being killed at these residential schools? How is that
So
Go ahead,
I
Jose.
read one book, and this is just one book, and for a project. And these children, like Robbie Rock said, were taken from their families, willingly, unwillingly. They didn't speak French or English. So these kids were starved. There was never enough food. These kids were abused. If these kids did not follow what the teachers, priests, nuns demanded of them, they were beaten. Straps, rulers, kicked, pushed downstairs, uh, electric chairs.
Oh my God.
That's just some of it. So it's not like
They were
these
abused.
kids, it's yeah, we were just killing those kids, and basically whoops, it they fell down the stairs. Some of these kids would try to run away. Now these residential schools were so far away from their original homes, right, where they come from. So what would happen as well is that they would try to get back home in the middle of winter. They would freeze. There's no buses. They had to walk
Goodness.
through these forests. So essentially, that's what it is. It was these kids
Wow.
died at the hand of priests, nuns, educators, if they did not conform.
What was the
Very
religious?
simple.
I have two questions actually. What was the religious group? Was it Catholics or
It's
Catholic.
Christian, mostly Catholic. There were some Anglican churches, some United churches, but it does come from a Judeo-Christian ideology.
Okay. And what would do you know the years that this was happening? The time frame?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, but roughly the 1830s until 1996,
1997.
1996,
That recent.
1997.
97. Yes.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to know.
last one closed in the late 90s.
Wow. So do we know if there were those deaths were still occurring then, or are these like do we have any sense of
This is
like
all
how long
this is
this
all
was
new
happening?
history for us. This is all new information. I know that the stories have been there from the elders. There have been a lot of eyewitness accounts and testimonials, and there have been some pieces of evidence, but now this is mass evidence. These are mass graves. So this isn't stuff that can just be swept under the rug, ignored, and just kept away from the Canadian people anymore. This is forcing
Yeah.
us to take a really difficult look at our nation, its development, the history, and what we've been taught to believe.
I always put myself like when with these situations, I always try to envision myself in those experiences, and I just can't even imagine being a child forced into that situation. You don't understand what's going
I
on.
can't.
People, they're using like physical abuse to get you to understand, and it's just not
Mhm.
making any sense. And you, even if you try to do the right things, it's still never the right thing. I just can't even imagine being a child caught up in that. Um, and then to see your friends killed or people just disappearing. I don't know what even the children must have been seeing in those situations, and it just, I mean, it's so sad.
Evil. I know. I couldn't even.
Yes,
I can't even fathom. Like I can't. I really can't.
I mean, there's been a
Um.
lot of evils done throughout history. I mean, the U.S. is it's not like we're immune. I mean, you just mentioned we had some simpler residential schools, um, but I mean, just I don't even know what brings a human being to choose to treat another human being like that. I,
Ignorance,
you,
Yeah.
fear,
um,
power, control. If you weren't Catholic, if you didn't speak French or
Hate.
English, you didn't fit in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Shame on us.
yeah, it just pisses me off every time I hear about anything that happens to kids, particularly.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Because they can't do much about it. Like animals, you can't. What can they do? They just take it.
So,
Yeah,
so
but
your question is, so back to your question. I didn't answer your question. I'm sorry, I got caught up. I apologize. But to
no,
answer
no.
your
It got
question,
sad.
as recognition, I mean, Canada Day, I don't know the significance of Canada Day for one. So I don't, um, I don't
Canada
know.
Day basically recognizes that when we became a confederation.
Okay, so sort of like our federal, July 4th, Independence Day, et cetera, celebration. Um,
Very similar.
And you're saying, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind. Well, I think there should be some advocacy for remembrance of the victims. There should be there should be some consideration for a day specifically for that. And I'm not against using Canada Day to commemorate this. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I think there should be more. There should be more. There's not enough
Oh
at this
yeah.
point. I
Okay.
mean,
Oh,
unfortunately, I guess
absolutely.
this is new information, and so we've got to get somewhere with it. But go ahead, Jose.
It is and it isn't. I kind of got in a discussion with a friend of mine that works closely with the Indigenous people, and this friend of mine is really put off because it's like this has been out for many, many years. Now, why haven't we heard of it? Why have we not paid attention until now? Right?
Yeah.
Is it because it's social media and it's everywhere and it's more in the open now? Because I'm ashamed to say it, and I will share something with you. As I was in grade school, um, my history classes made me fear Indigenous people. I'm going to be
Mm,
absolutely honest with you. They were known as savages. They
mhm.
were known as uneducated people, people that drank all the time, that did drugs, that had no money, and especially like specific bands, how they were known as scalpers.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you teach that to grade school kids, what do you think they will take
As
away?
adults.
And now this is being taught to us from our families, from our parents that have been taught the same thing, from our grandparents. You know what I mean? So of course we're growing
Yeah.
up with this bias, and it's something that I've been sharing, is that I'm really angry with the education that I got because I was taught to fear the Indigenous people. And you know what? The more I read, they are beautiful people. They're what they bring, their thoughts, their behaviors. It's just, they are so in love with the land. They're people of the land, and they are just really amazing people. And what I have been myself led to believe is very, very deceiving, and I am ashamed.
It's not very different than what's happened here. With like critical race theory and things like that. It's just, because the
Yep.
history that's
Mhm.
taught is not reality. It's just to denigrate and to create a sense of superiority, and it's a shame. I mean, it's a shame that it's
Mhm.
happening because Canada is considered one of the more progressive countries in the world. So far more progressive than the U.S. even, and to even hear that that's what's being
Yeah.
taught,
Happened.
in your grade school in your lifetime
Yeah.
is disappointing. So Jacqueline Robinson says, I am loath to tell another sovereign country what they should do, but please keep doing what you're doing. We have our own backyard to clean up. Pretty much what I was just
Mhm.
saying. I mean,
Yeah.
we have there's a lot.
Big mess.
I
Big mess.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, and what we've done with, um, natives in this country, indigenous people in this country. I mean, that can't be swept under the rug. I mean, it was, and we have some very horribly well documented
Yeah.
things that the U.S. did to indigenous people.
Native
So,
Americans.
um,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm sad to hear all this going on. Any final
Absolutely.
thoughts,
And
Robbie?
just to circle back to some of the conversation we were having earlier, what brings people to do something like this? One of my favorite quotes from the author Steven Weinberg is that with or without religion, people can behave well and bad people can do evil. But for good people to do evil, that takes religion. When you have that moral authority, when you have that rightness behind you, you can push any agenda. And unfortunately, a lot of people will buy into it because you've got those masses.
We've seen it.
So yeah.
True.
So it's really time. I'm not glad that we're finding these things, but I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad that Indigenous issues that have been long overlooked in Canada will definitely get some traction out of this, because there is a lot of furor and backlash from the Canadian people. Neo, the last image that you showed was a church in Saskatoon that was vandalized with the red paint and the hands, "We were children." I know that of at least 3 church burnings in Canada on Indigenous lands in the last few weeks. So it's Canada's hurt. Canada's angry, and quite rightfully so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia points out we have they did an episode. Olivia and Gianni Storm did an episode. Excuse me, an episode on the failure of the education system. She suggests that Jose, you and her cover that. Excuse me. When you join Unscripted in a couple of weeks. So. All right.
Thank you all for your discussion, and I really appreciate it.
Listening.
So, truth, lies, or shenanigans?
Lies.
Lots of
and
lies
Truth
in there.
it. There's
Lots
lies.
of
And
lies.
there's shenanigans, but lies.
Yeah. Lies.
Lies.
A lot of lies. All right, let's see if I can make it through here without coughing. I only got something in my throat all of a sudden.
Anya, you need tea.
Something's up going on. All right. But yes, thank you, Robbie. All right, let's move on.
Lies